How's it going, guys? It's Jace, and we are talking about the game, the system of the game. Of course, as people may know, the system is pretty bare bones. This game is more of a character-driven game, but system's still important to know. So I am here to teach you guys the overview of the system. Some pretty basic stuff, some things that you may not know that you should know about the game and how the game works. So I'm going to go through all the systems of how the game works. So first things first is movement. How does run work? Run has recovery on it, if you didn't already know. Yeah, you can't run block instantly in this game, unlike other anime games, where you can basically just run up to somebody and do whatever you want. This game does not have that. See, if I run up full speed, oops. Oh wait, I think I have them set to multiple recordings, right? Yes, I do. So if I run, I can't block. I have to take the time to run, then block, which is very important in this game. So one thing you should be doing in this game for run is to run stop, kind of like a dash. Think about it like a dash, pretty much. If you're from full screen, it's okay to run up, especially if you have advantage, like on a fireball. But around this range, you want to be careful. You want to be using run as like a dash, like a forward dash, like in Street Fighter. And you want to be aware of your opponent's normals. So you want to be staying out of their range of the normals if you are going to run. So being this close is probably a bad idea to run because they can react and hit you. You can't do anything about it either, because he has to recover from the run, then press the button, so I'm always going to be at an advantage. So utilize run very carefully. You know, walking is very good in this game, so you don't always have to run. It's pretty important. Backdashes. Backdashes, you are frame 1 airborne, which means if I hit you, let's see if I get this right. I jump in the air, even though I backdash, which is good and bad. For being airborne frame 1, you can avoid throws. You can avoid a bunch of other things. But if you get, and also if you get hit out of, if you get out of, I can't talk today. If you get hit out of backdash, right, you become airborne like that, which is good because you don't have to take a combo, but you're still being put in pressure by your opponent. So backdashing on certain things has its uses, but it's not a very good get out of jail free card. Let's talk about jumping. Obviously, you have two types of jumps. You have jump, you have normal jump and super jump. Normal jump, of course, you're a little low to the ground, but if you super jump, you fall a little bit faster than jumping normal. You have a little bit more time to move around in the air, and you also have momentum. So if you run and super jump, you go a little bit farther, whether compared to just super jumping forward. Also, if you run and jump, you have a little bit more momentum as well. So jumping is important because it does mix up the timing on when they anti-air you. So something like this, right? If I jump forward at you, if I jump forward at Grant here, he has a pretty easy time to anti-air me. But, you know, in a situation like this, so say if I mix it up and I super jump, not only do I go on the opposite side of him, which could mess up his anti-air, I also, of course, get side swap. So I could possibly hit them with jump D and get advantage, and possibly get him into the corner, depending on where I am. So let's say I'm over here, right? You know, he's pushing me into the corner and decided to jump out. Now he's in the corner because I super jumped instead of normal jumping, and I possibly hit him out of anti-airing me because he messed up his jump time. He messed up his anti-air on my jump. So it's good to use both kinds of jump-ins to just mix up your opponents. And also, of course, in the corner is very good as well. Let's say if they're not challenging you in anything, you can of course do this just to get out, compared to doing this where you won't really go that far. You might end up being still in front of him or being right next to him, which will still leave you negative because he can throw you. You can of course press the button, stuff like that. Next, let's talk about the block button. So the block button is very important to this game. Disregarding the proxy OS, if you're familiar with the game, you probably have heard of it. I'm not going to worry about that because it's going to be removed in the game. It's going to be removed out of the game in March, most likely for the American release, so we're not going to talk about the proxy. but we'll just talk about how block button is in general. Block button is if you hold down or neutral, even up will guard you. Also down back will also guard you as well. If you hold forward or straight, forward or back, it's going to give you roll and spot dodge. So if you want to use a block button, you're going to have to do neutral, up. Up is probably not necessary, just using neutral, or down back to guard down. And currently in this version of the game, guard button has the most priority out of any singular button. You can still throw tech out of guard, but any singular button I press, nothing will beat guard. Guard has the most priority. As of now, we don't know when the game changes, when they update the game, but for now, it has the most priority. So you really can't do attacks out of it. It also defends you against cross-ups, which is very important. And I'll explain to you that. I'll explain to you why. You see, no matter what I press, if I hold the guard button, it's going to protect me in the front or in the back. Same thing it goes for if I hold down. And a good example of this is for Fairy's mix-up, right? When she pulls you in and she summons GG, the little animal, sometimes they like to roll forward to mix you up. If you're guessing that they're going to go low, using the guard button down is also a very good tool against that, because you won't have to worry about a cross-up like roll, because this will guard you against both sides no matter what happens. So it's very important to use guard button appropriately. Whether you think you're going to be crossed up or not, guard button is a good tool to use for those situations. Now for the other moves that are attacks for guard button is roll and spot dodge. Roll and spot dodge, they lose to lows, they lose to throws, and they also have counter hit on their recovery. I don't remember the exact frame data of them, but there is a decent amount of recovery to them. So I'll show you an example. Say he tries to roll at me, right? But I can read him properly. He is now in counter hit state and takes a lot of damage. So rolling willy-nilly is not a smart idea, because you can take quite a bit of damage. Roll and spot dodge do have their place, but it's not good to just mash them and try to challenge them afterwards. Because you are still in recovery, so you don't get your turn back just because you spot dodge. You don't get to press a button immediately. And if I read that properly, same thing happens. I can also punish you on the recovery. So be aware when you're going to be using roll and spot dodge. Roll and spot dodge does have their spots to use them. For example, in a fireball war, it's very good. I'll explain how the cooldowns work later, but just to give the example for spot dodging. Obviously you take chip in this game, right? Chip does exist on special moves. But, of course, rolling and spot dodging around moves can be very useful. Especially in the case of whether you're running, like we talked about earlier. Run does have a lot of recovery to them. But, you can cancel it into two things. You can cancel it into roll, you can cancel it into spot dodge. So say the example, like you're trying to run up on them, and you mess up, right? You go too far, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to get hit because I'm running. But, you can save yourself by spot dodging or rolling. Rolling is a little bit dangerous in a situation like this, but it does have its spots, of course, to be doing them in. Next up is instant blocking. How did instant block work? It's pretty self-explanatory. Instant blocking just gives you extra bar. There was some, rumors when the game wasn't out yet that it would negate some chip damage. That doesn't seem to be the case, at least in this version of the game. But it is nice to use instant blocking for situations where you want to be gaining meter, especially if you're not scared of the situation. Actually, I'm gonna give you a better example. Second. Oops. You see, that's a lot of bar gained. Actually, I'll show you how much bar I gained from this, just to give you a better example. So I'll put myself to 30. Ah, there's a gap in between that, so... See? I gained 10 there. Let's see what happens if I just block. I only gained 5. So, the instant blocking bar gain does add up over time. So, it's good to be using instant block when you can. Especially in situations where you're not very scared of what the opponent is doing. Alright, next auto combos. We're on to attacking. So, auto combos are not like Dragon Ball. They have proximity to them, so you can't do them from very far away. You have to do them from pretty close up. Some characters differentiate in their auto combos. For example, right? Actually, I should switch to Catalina so I give you a better example on how they differentiate between characters. Once the game loads, eventually. Okay, now, as you see here, there has to be a proximity to when I'm using it. But some characters differentiate in that situation. As you see, Grant has to be pretty up close to use it. Catalina's 5B goes much farther in proximity compared to Grant's. I could be all the way out here and I'll still get close 5B. Compared to Gran, where Gran has to be a little bit closer than her. You see how my 5B doesn't work from this far away? I have to be a little bit closer than her. So depending on the character, the auto combos do change on proximity. So check your character, see how far they're able to do auto combo from, because it does change between characters. Next is counter hit. How does counter hit work? Counter hit is very bad in this game to get hit by. There's a lot of extra hits done, and it depends on the move you're doing. Some moves don't really change on hits done that much, depending on the counter hit, but some moves change a lot. For example, if I do 5C, right, I can't really do 5C here, but if I have counter hit, I can do 5C, and that does a lot of damage compared to something like this. So 25 compared to 35. That's 1,000 more damage I just did because of counter hit. And counter hit's very useful because from medium to heavy normals they do change a lot. So for example, this combo doesn't work on regular hit, but on counter hit it does work. So if I can recognize that they're getting counter hit, I can change my situation to convert off of that. You see, I use my eyes, and I can see if it's counter hit. I can turn that counter hit into a real combo, when normal hit does not. So counter hit is very important to recognize when you get it. And also for extra damage, like of course I could just do this, right? I can do 5B, because Grant can do that. But if I see it's counter hit, I can convert into 5C, or 5H. Which is a lot more damage compared to this. See? 14 versus 19. That adds up. So be aware of counter hit. Next, let's talk about cooldown. So each special move have their own cooldown to them. I should probably change it so you guys can see what they are. And of course, doing the normal input will decrease my cooldown compared to the skills button, which we will talk about in a second. Same thing for all the moves. So with DP here, the DP comes back pretty quickly. But if I use a skills button, it takes quite a while to come back. Same thing for EX moves as well. Let's say I do EX Fireball. It does take quite a while, you can see. But if I do EX Fireball with skills, it takes even longer for it to come back. So cooldown is very important to manage, whether it's your own cooldown or your opponent's cooldown. let's say if you're in a fireball war and they spend their EX fireball, pay attention to that logo. Because that means it's your turn to throw fireballs and they can't really challenge you for it. So you want to be aware of what the moves are. Also, the icons do change, right? So you do kind of want to remember what the icons are. Because if you forget, right? Let's say you thought this was fireball, right? Say, oh, maybe this is fireball. All right, I'll show Catalina for example. Catalina's a better example of this. Or, yeah, let's do this, right? Let's say you thought this was fireball, and you're playing around here thinking it's fireball, or you're throwing fireballs willy-nilly thinking it is fireball when they can still do their own. So you want to pay attention to what their icon represents for their moves. A lot of them are pretty unified. Like you see, Catalina and Grant pretty much share the exact same icons. This is the fireball icon. This is the DP icon. This is the Rekka icon. So yeah, learn the icons for the characters because they matter a lot. For my final example for cooldowns, cooldowns are very important not only for paying attention for EX moves but also regular moves in general. If I'm in a fireball war with Catalina, right? If I block this, she gets her fireball back pretty instantly. But if I were to spot dodge this, you see how her fireball didn't come back immediately after doing the first one? That's because the fireball is still on the screen technically. Because I blocked it at first, the fireball is off the screen and the cooldown begins. The cooldown recovery begins. But if I spot dodge the fireball, if the fireball is traveling across the screen, she can't throw a fireball yet because that fireball hasn't ended technically. So it's very important to spot dodge, especially during fireball wars, to gain the extra advantage on your opponent, because if they're just blocking your fireballs and they're not spot dodging, you will constantly get the advantage during fireball wars. Just one example of how cooldowns can be very utilized for not only EX moves but normal moves in general. Next, let's talk about the skills button. Like I mentioned before, it does increase the cooldown on special moves and also EX moves as well. But one thing it does have that is very beneficial to it is supers. Supers do change slightly. If you do the normal input for supers, you do gain a bigger sweet spot window. So I'll show you for example. If I do Grand's level 1 from here, see how it gives me the one hit to it? But let's say if I do it from here with the normal input. Oops, my bad. Damn, I can't play fighting games today. There we go. Actually, that's a little bit too close. Let's do it from right here. You see how it still says 2K? That was a little bit too close. Right? The damage stays the same most of the time. When you have max damage scaling, the supers do less. But most of the time, your super is going to do the exact same amount of damage whether you use the skills button for supers or the normal input. There are cases, for example, like this, where... Actually, I'm trying to think of a good example for this. If I do this, I'm just curious. That's the same. Alright, I can't think of an example right now to show you that the sweet spot does change. But believe me, it does. There are certain situations or in combos where you won't get the full animation off of certain supers because you do the skills button. But I would test that to make your life easier. So if you do a combo, whether you do the normal input or the skills button super, if you do the same damage, you're going to want to use the skills button because the combo makes it way easier. You're cutting one less input out of your combo, of course. So skills button is very useful. Also, it's very useful for DPs. So one button DP compared to normal DP means a lot. Of course, you can input the normal DP and get the DP back. But let's say you're in the corner right here, and you know Catalina is pressuring you very heavily. Just using the skills button for DP is good enough because the DP comes back relatively quickly, if you do normal DP and not EX. So in situations like this, it might be safer to do skills button DP compared to normal DP, because you might mess up the input. You know, things could happen during a match if you're playing online or in a tournament. Nerves could hit. So it's a little more peace of mind knowing that you can mash skills button and forward, and instead of having to do the entire input, because your move will come back quick enough so it wouldn't matter. Same thing for EX moves. EX moves are also pretty good. Let's say you're playing neutral, instead of hitting the whole DP input, you know, you're in neutral, holding forward skills button and H to do EX is a lot safer than doing the input entirely. Yeah, it might sound scrubby, but it is useful, especially during tournament nerves. It could really make or break, because if you mess up that input, you're going to be very tight. Knowing where you could have just pressed forward and the skills button to save your ass. Alright, next up is throws. How do throws work? Throws give you hard knockdown, as you can see right there. It says down, which means they cannot use any of their wake-ups. And I'll talk about wake-ups in a second. But throws do about 1500 damage, which is a lot for a game that throws are very good in. And every time you throw somebody, you get to run up pressure them no matter who you are. No matter what throw you do, you always get to run up pressure them. I don't know a character in the game that doesn't get some sort of advantage off their throws. So be sure to check that, but throws are very good in this game. Obviously, there's throw tech and delay throw tech. And a very easy way to beat that is, of course, with overheads or if you shimmy them, because throw range is very short in this game. So if you want them to think you're going to throw them, obviously pressure them and back up just a little bit, and the throw's a whiff. And this is still in range for heavy auto combo. And since throws have a lot of recovery in them, you can make somebody whiff very easily and punish them very heavily. Do the same example off overhead too. Same thing. You know, throws are very strong. But if you make them whiff, you can make them pay for it very dearly. Alright, finally, we have knockdowns. Like I mentioned before, throws give you hard knockdown, so you can't use any of your tech options. But there is two different types of knockdowns. One, I'll show you both actually. I'll just do it to myself. So there is quick rise, which is down in a button, any button, and then there is back roll, or whatever you want to call it. Quick rise or delay rise, and to do back roll is you press back in a button. So down in a button for quick rise, back in a button for back roll. They have their situations where you want to use them. Obviously, quick rise gets you out of a recovery a lot faster, but in the corner you want to be utilizing both. Especially mid-screen, there are going to be some situation where you want to be back rolling, situation you want to be quick rising. But in the corner, it doesn't really matter because they can meet you regardless. So you do want to mix it between the both. Well, also, you can do nothing as well. You can also not rise at all. You can just press nothing. You'll get sent into a hard knockdown state. So utilize all three accordingly. You'll figure out when to use them. And supers, like we mentioned before, you can do it with the shortcut. You can do it with normal input as well. Two types of supers. The second super you get from 30% health or less, which is the super skybound art. Same thing applies for that one. You can do it with the skills button, but you have to press skills and D together to get the super skybound art. So the skills button doesn't just give you level 1, it does give you level 2. If you press both D or the unique button and the skills button together while doing the input. But that's it for me. Hopefully you learned a decent amount about the game and how the system works overall. And I will be continually doing character overviews as well. So most likely I'll be doing Percival next, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, hopefully you learned some things today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.